Hello, hello, welcome. Day Drinking with David, back again, finally, after a somewhat long hiatus. Sorry about that, just needed some time to regroup. I think the entire country did. It is still lockdown situation. We're drinking at home. It is a very exciting day drinking. We are welcoming my friend and partner, Romina from Craft Spirits Cooperative, the master distiller of Capurro Pisco, to talk about the special spirit of South America. Here is Romina. It's coming up right away. It's been quite a year already. There she is. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great to see you. It's been way too long.
It has been. I was trying to think about when was the last time we got together, and I think it was summer of 2019.
That sounds
Maybe.
about
Yeah.
I have no memories because I have a 4-year-old, and for some reason it just sucks all the memories except for about booze. I can remember. You have a little one. Oh, how?
Yes, he's four also.
Yeah, they were pretty close. That's awesome. Are you guys hanging in there?
Yeah, a lot of outside playtime.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Running. We race out in the front so that he can get some energy out.
We got the razors, so we have we do every night we do a couple loops on the scooters. It's really fun
Yeah.
for the bedtime routine. But enough about the kiddos. How's life? How's everything with you? I know it's been a complicated 12 months, but we're really happy to have you here and be selling your products still. And tell me what's going on.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for all the support with Capurro and the whole portfolio. I was watching some of your other live sessions. It's cool that you guys have been doing this throughout the lockdown, and it's a great way to interact with customers and have them learn more about the products. We got through it, and we're still working through it, but you know, working with partners like you guys obviously helps a lot to continue to get our products out there. It's just in a different way. We worked a lot with restaurants before, and so obviously with everything that's happening, the consumer really changed their buying practices and started working more closely with you guys, and so we had to do the same, and we've made it work. So
Yeah, well, and we're glad you did because you have some really, really interesting stuff. And can you tell us a little bit about the Craft Spirits Co-op and how you got here? Because it's a pretty interesting story. Not a lot of people, period, just are able to do what you've done, and I'd love for people to hear about it.
all right. Well, where do I start?
Start
um,
through. No, start wherever makes sense for you.
so when I decided to bring Capurro to the US, there really was no infrastructure that best suited small craft brands, especially imports, to be able to compete in a market like the US. So, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that happens to be able to get these bottles of great products out to the customer. And the infrastructure just wasn't there for a small family brand to thrive and to do it efficiently. And so that's kind of how, in a nutshell, the Craft Spirits Cooperative started, because we started talking to other brands that had very similar heritage and quality and price point, and they were imports, and they all had similar issues. And so we kind of banded together to be able to learn and grow together, and that eventually developed into import and distribution as well. And we're not just solely imports. We do work with a lot of domestic brands as well. But that's kind of the basis of it. And what we do is a lot of brand building and education, both for the consumer and for the trade, about all the specifics of our products and all the things that go into production, which is what really differentiates the products, you know, within each category. A lot of them will handle their own agriculture, which is really important. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Does that cover your question?
Yeah, you got it. Got it. Well, and tell us, you know, obviously that brings us to the next point, which is the impetus for your company really is the existence of this Pisco, which is a family tradition for you. And although from what I understand, this brand wasn't for sale in Peru before you brought it here, correct? There's Capurro right there. Tell us a little bit about the family history, how you got here, and getting the Pisco from there to here, and what that means, you know, for you personally, and it's an interesting story, to say the least.
Okay, so I was born in Peru, but I was raised outside San Francisco. And when my grandparents would come visit in the summertime, they would bring in their suitcase bottles of Pisco. And as a little girl, I would ask them why they were carrying bottles of alcohol, heavy bottles of alcohol in their suitcases, and why we couldn't just buy it at the grocery store. And they would explain to me, you know, this is what we make as a family. This is, these are the grapes we grow. And so as a little girl, I promised my grandfather, I'm the eldest granddaughter, and there's a lot of cousins. And I promised him that I would bring his Pisco to the US. And he said, one day the gringos are going to drink my Pisco and they're going to love it. And so I was little, I had no idea what I was promising, but I promised him that. And then in college was when I really started to really look at what it would take to bring the product here. And did a lot of research, and I was in LA at the time, so did a lot of drinking research as well. And really got to know the industry. And I worked with a large distributor after college as well, so got to learn the ropes from that side. And then I want to say, what year was it? 2010, 2000, yeah. I went down to Peru and worked with my family to really get my hands in on the production process and learn everything, and try to bring our first vintage out, which took a lot longer than we thought. A lot of paperwork, and we had to change the bottle for the States and the label and all of that stuff. And I don't know if you know this, but in Latin America, they work at a very different pace than they do here. So I went down there expecting American pace, but it was very different. But I enjoyed it and learned a ton. And then finally got our first vintage, our 2011 vintage in the States in 2012. Wow. So before all that, though, my grandfather was the distiller and had been for about 50 years. And then I took over in 2019. That's my 4-year-old who just opened the door. Have you heard that? You know, he learned from his father and his grandfather, and grandfather on both sides, actually. So it's really been a tradition that's been passed down through the generations. And I always like to say a Pisco distillation is an oral history. It's not really something you can write in a book. It's not an equation. You have to be there to learn it, to taste it, to touch it and smell it and see what it's like. And, you know, unfortunately, I think as times become more modern, oral traditions in general seem to get more lost. So we've been producing for over 100 years, and I'm 5th generation involved in production. Wow.
And Capurro is the family name, correct? Is that?
Yes, that's the last name. That's what that means.
And so I you know, Pisco is one of those categories that since I've started in this business, like, God, 15 years ago, more, you know, every year someone's like, oh, Pisco's going to be huge this year. Like it's really going to pop off. And I think it's been slower than a lot of the big companies were expecting. because I think a lot of them miss this part that you have in a lot of ways, to make it historically important, to make it about the people in the fields growing the grapes, that connection, and not to just say, oh, it's, you know, pisco sour, and you know, and just stick with that tradition. Of course, the pisco has been popular in the United States for a long time. I mean, before Prohibition, it was extremely popular, particularly in San Francisco. And so there were a lot of people drinking a lot of pisco because it tastes good, and perhaps it was affordable at the time. Well, maybe not. I don't really know. Can you talk a little bit about, just in terms of detail, what the difference between pisco and other great brandies are, not only in terms of distillation, but in terms of élevage and production practices in the vineyards? It's a big question, but how does it differ from, you know, a white Armagnac or you know, other grape-based brandies?
Okay, so I'll answer in pieces. So Pisco is the traditional spirit of Peru, and for those of you who don't know, it's made 100% from grapes. There are no additives in it. So differentiate, how it differentiates. One of the biggest differentiators is, and you know, I always ask if I'm wrong to say this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Pisco is the only spirit that's distilled once, and it's bottled. Most spirits have to be distilled twice, and then they'll be cut down, or they'll be proofed off the still on the second distillation. But for Pisco, we're harvesting our grapes at a fairly high sugar, so between 22, 24 bricks, which then would give us, and for Capurro, we do a natural fermentation, so we're not adding any yeast or water or anything. And the fermentation can take up to 30 days. And so then you end up with a wine, and you're looking at about half of that for the ABV of the wine, or, you know, the mash essentially that you're starting with. And so it's a fairly high ABV for to start distilling at, and therefore you're able to get at a pretty high ABV with one distillation run. And I remember when we first launched in the US, that was a question that I always got, where it was a shock, like people didn't believe me that we just distilled once to proof. So that's a pretty big differentiator.
On columns or on pot stills?
Pot still. Yeah.
So yeah, it is very, very unusual to do a single distillation on a pot. I imagine that's part of why it captures so much of the essence. What proof does it come off that first distillation at?
You mean like what's the highest during the whole process?
Yeah.
The highest is about 50%.
Okay. So
yeah.
Relatively low, yeah, in one pass. That's definitely unique, and of course the grape varietals are relatively unique. I mean, you have a number of different varietals that are used in the vineyards, and the growing practices are quite different, from what I understand.
Yeah, so they're all Vitis vinifera, and there's 8 approved grape varietals for Pisco production. So 4 are aromatic and 4 are non-aromatic. And today we'll be tasting a blend and an aromatic varietal. And those grapes are different in terms of, you know, differentiators. They are hybrids that came to South America and then Peru in the 1500s, mainly from Europe, from Spain. They're not grapes that you're seeing everywhere else, but for example, like Torontel is Toronte, so you'll see that in Argentina, but it's not distilled in Argentina. And then people also confuse Pisco with grappa a lot. I hear that a lot. And grappa, you know, your conventional grappa is made with the pomace, the leftovers after wine production, versus Pisco, we actually use the wine and then distill that. So you're distilling less tannins, you're gonna get less of that bitter, harsh finish. Pisco is not supposed to taste like bad grappa.
Right.
It tastes more like good grappa. The really expensive kind.
And the other thing that I've always noted about it is that there's a tradition not only of doing vintage white spirits, which I think is really interesting, but also of resting the spirit in neutral vessels. You can see this one's 36 months age. I mean, not age because it's got no wood, so we can't call it. It's rested 36 months. Tell me about that process and what that means for the flavor and why you all do it.
So that's something that our family has always done. We've always rested at least a year. And at that point, we'll start tasting the tanks and we'll release based on taste. And so that's why you'll see the vintage or the months that the product was rested. And really at 3 months, the Pisco, let me backtrack a little bit. Pisco is a denomination of origin product. So there are rules that govern its production processes. And one of those rules is that you have to rest the product for 3 months after distillation, and then it can go to market. And we've always done at least a year. And the reason for that is at 3 months, we as a family believe the product is still raw. It still has really sharp edges to it. On a molecular level, things are still moving around. And it can taste really spicy on the palate, like hot. And also, Pisco grapes have really strong flavor profiles to them. And if you taste a product that's just been distilled and blended, for example, it'll taste really disruptive on the palate. It won't have a flow of flavors to it, where you'll get, sour apple in one direction and you get vanilla in another, and they don't really meld into each other. And so that's kind of an unpleasant experience for the drinker, for the consumer. So that's another reason why we rested, because letting them mellow out, they kind of get to marinate with each other. And then the aromatic profiles develop more as the longer the product sits right after distillation. So like the terpenes will come out more as the product is resting more. And so that's another big reason why we rest longer.
Cool. I mean, it definitely makes a difference if you've ever tried industrial pisco. I mean, it's a whole different world than this. I mean, 3 months doesn't seem like enough, especially once you taste a 3-year rest. And I'm sure you guys do more. It's generally rested in stainless steel, right? And that's typical.
Yeah.
And are you proofing down before resting or proofing down before bottling? Is it rested at?
So we don't proof down, actually. So, and that's one of the laws for Pisco production. So whatever we cut it off the still at, there's technically some angel share, you could call it. There's supposedly these tanks are supposed to keep out the oxygen, but I'm pretty sure there's some oxygen exchange happening. So we'll lose about, it's very little, but maybe half a grade. So, if we're cutting it at 42.5, by the time it's bottled, it'll come in at 42. Yeah, we're not adding any water to it. It's just whatever's coming off the still.
You're legally not allowed to add water to Pisco.
No, so there's this really old poem, and if you look on the back of our bottle, it's written in really tiny writing. Probably, let me see. So you see where you have the red and then the white writing on top of the red. That is
us
in Spanish.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to try and read it.
I almost did.
You should give it a try.
I'll let you read it.
Okay. I'll read it in Spanish. Mientras las uvas sigan llorando, yo me beberé sus lágrimas. While the grapes continue to cry, I will drink their tears. So this is a very dramatic poem talking about Pisco. It's saying that when the grapes cry, I'll drink their tears, because Pisco is so pure when it's made that when grapes cry, Pisco is made. That's Pisco. You're drinking some emotional grape juice there.
Yeah. Interesting thing. And, we don't really have an understanding of the culture of drinking Pisco in Peru, which I think is what a lot of the, people drink this with food. It's not just Pisco sours. I mean, tell us a little bit how Peruvian food is starting to be available in the States, good Peruvian food. And it has been in LA for some time, but there's some high-end food. Like, what's the normal, like, besides just making a sour, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, when would you serve a moscatel in like a traditional Peruvian meal? Is it after dinner? Is it during the main course? Like, how do you serve it?
So moscatel is typically sipped down there.
Hmm.
There's more, so the cocktail scene in Peru is just growing, I think. There's definitely a cocktail scene there right now,
Hmm.
but 5 years ago, there was really, there was really no cocktail scene yet. And the craft cocktail scene is developing there, which is really exciting to see. And so now you're starting to see more adventurous things happen with Pisco, but there are your staples, which of course is the Pisco sour, and that's served at every diplomatic event. Pisco sour is served, but the Pisco sour, when done well, is a really great cocktail. When not done well, is a really scary cocktail. And for those of you who don't know, a Pisco sour is made with egg whites for the texture. It's not, there's not scrambled eggs in your cocktail. It's just for the texture, and it gives you that foamy creaminess aspect to it. And then there's a huge coastline in Peru. It sits on the Pacific coast. Peruvians love to go to the beach and they love to drink at the beach. And they're not making pisco sours at the beach. They're making a drink called chilcanos.
Hmm.
And this is pisco, ginger ale, and a few drops of fresh squeezed lime juice. So easy to throw that in a bag and make that at the beach.
Yeah.
And I like to make mine with ginger beer just because it's a little spicier. And it's just a few drops of the lime juice to cut the sweetness from the soda. Um, but that drink, we like to have it in our family. We have two before lunch. Gets a nice little buzz going. We serve it in a Collins glass,
Hmm.
and it's a great appetite opener. And then we have a big lunch. So we don't have a big dinner. We have a big lunch. It's called almuerzo, right around 1 o'clock. And then we take a nap, we siesta. Um, and then we go back to work in the afternoon. But the Chilcano is really, I would say that's the most consumed cocktail, Pisco cocktail in Peru. And then in the States, we've seen a lot of really creative things being done with Capurro and the whole lineup. So, like I was saying, Moscatel in Peru is typically sipped on,
Hmm.
but in the States, we've seen lots of different cocktails with it. So, a lot of stirred drinks, a lot of martini Manhattan variations, which have been interesting. But really, we like to see people experiment with it and see whatever flavor profile they want to go and see what they want to
Mm.
do with it.
Yeah, I think wow, now I'm getting pretty thirsty. I think the whole idea of sipping a white brandy here hasn't really been uh, focused on. I think that's something the aromatic varietals are really, really fun to do, especially for spirits lovers. Um, but of course, they're so unique that in a cocktail, like you can do so much with it because these powerful aromatics are it's really not available in other spirits like that. It's just not the same. I, I always thought that was interesting. Do people consume straight pisco like with food ever, or is it just like it's always cocktails?
Sometimes, yeah, they'll like I think pisco pairs really well with fish, especially ceviche.
Yeah.
So they'll sip on it with ceviche. They use it a lot for desserts as well.
Mm.
So there's a fruit in Peru that tastes like it's called lucuma, and it tastes like if maple syrup and a sweet potato had a baby. That's kind of what it tastes like. But it pairs really well with quebranta. And so you can make like a chocolate mousse with that. So people will use it for desserts. It's great with coffee as well, like a post dinner, to sip on.
Yeah.
Um, and
I like
yeah,
the
that's
dry spirit and cutting a dessert with it. That's something that I do. Like I love Calvados and like apple tart or something like that. That's like the best.
yeah.
Um, cool. Well, I can't wait any longer. Can I drink some?
Yes, let's dive in.
I'm super excited. You guys are bringing a new Armagnac in too. I was very excited to see that you're selling Armagnac now. That's fun.
Yes, throughout the portfolio, as you know this, but for everyone else tuning in here, we like to focus on producers who are very tuned into every aspect of production, but very deliberately at every step of production make decisions towards quality over quantity. And these guys have been doing that, just that. They're also a family of several generations. And ironically, so we're looking at the whole portfolio. There's a lot of like women distillers and, women who are running the companies, the spirit companies we're working with. And that wasn't on purpose, but it just worked out nicely.
Well, Domaine Millet is one that we sell a ton of their Gascogne Blanc, and I've been to the domain, and it's top notch stuff, like really really fun.
I didn't know you had been there. That's awesome.
Well,
you beat us to it.
Armagnac, if I can spend more time there, I do. So yeah,
I remember you guys used to have really big trips out to Armagnac, right? Where a lot of you went.
We did that, yeah, once or twice a year if we could. Now we have not so much opportunity. Plus, they've stuck a new tariff. That's exciting news.
Oh yes.
On French brandy. Thank you.
Maybe it'll be one of the repeal things.
I mean, it's not like Armagnac is so huge. I mean, go ahead and tax cognac. I'm fine with that, but the Armagnac.
Yeah.
So anyway, Capurro, tell us about Acholado. This is a word. It's backwards, but people see this and often think it's a grape varietal. Obviously, it's not. Tell us what that's about and why they do it.
So Acholado means blend, and it's so by law, like I said, there's 8 approved grape varietals. So you have to use at least 2, and you can use up to all 8 if you want to accomplish the blend. You don't have to disclose your blend. The older distillation houses tend not to. We do not. My grandfather, it's a very tightly held secret for him. It's a blend of the available grapes. And I think, sometimes kind of like if you look at wine, the red blend is considered kind of like the lower end or whatever, of whatever the winery. In Peru, I think the Acholado kind of stands out from all the other grape varietals because it's the house blend, and that's where the blending expertise comes into play. Everyone can grow a Moscatel, everyone can grow a Quebranta, but not everyone can blend like you blend. And so that's kind of the differentiator. For us, the Acholado is our flagship. It's what we like to drink as a family when we get together. And what we're really trying to achieve here is that perfect balance of aromatics and texture. To sip alone, but you can also cocktail in any direction you want because there's a wide spectrum of flavors here. Yeah. But also you can execute any classic with it. So the texture on Capurro is a big differentiator for us because, for example, the Acholado and a Pisco Sour, there's this common what's the word? Erroneous belief, I guess, that it doesn't matter what Pisco you use for a Pisco Sour because you're hiding all the flavors. But really, sorry? Misconception there. That's the word. Pisco is really, you can tell the quality of a Pisco by examining 2 things, the aromatics and the finish. Definitely the texture's in there as well, but you want to have bright aromatics. You want it to, jump out of the glass. You want to be able to identify what the actual aromatic is. So if on the label they say, you're going to smell stone fruit, then you want to be able to actually identify the stone fruit, not just a ton of ethanol. And then on the finish, you want it to be long, you want it to be complex, but you also want it to be clean. You don't want it to just disappear. You don't want it to kind of like fizzle away. You want it to be a long, gradual finish. And so in a Pisco Sour, you're not going to taste Pisco mid-palate. You're going to taste it on the finish. And it's kind of, it's going to make you want another one right after you finish drinking it. You're still savoring it. You're still experiencing it. It's going to make you want another one. And so for us, with our acholado, it's a great option for that pisco sour, but you can also make a pisco punch with it, and you can also do a chilcano, or just sip it neat. Um,
Yeah.
so I have my pisco glass here.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Tell me, super drinkable. I love it. Tell me, you know, when in the process is the blending done? Is this blended after resting, or is it more you doing it in advance and then resting, or how's the blending process work?
Good question. So what we do is we'll distill individually, and then they rest, and then at a certain point, as we're tasting, then we start blending, and then after it blends, it rests some more,
Okay.
and then we'll bottle it. Yeah.
So it's a long process.
It's a long process, yeah, for the acholado. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, that's delicious. I mean, on the nose, you're right. Every time you go back, it's a different thing. I at first got a ton of that sort of green apple, and then some citrus for sure. There's some floral notes but not like perfumey per se. It's not, you guys aren't resting super strong on that Moscatel thing, which I think I don't know, maybe there's more Moscatel in this than I imagined, but it's
Well, remember, it's a secret, so I cannot confirm or deny anything.
Trying
to get me. I know you're trying to get me.
But any blending, it's like the sum of the parts are great in the whole. Like, it's not. I assume, I'm never having actually blended pisco, that it's not like you put quebranta and moscatel together, 1 + 1 = the flavor you're expecting. Like, that's the whole point of blending. It's not straightforward. So I imagine there's a lot of work that goes into that, especially producing something of this quality and consistency.
Yeah, it's definitely, a lot of small practice blends, I guess you could say, until we get to the right wine. Because we are even though our blend is a vintage product, we are trying for it to taste similar to the last one, especially the acholado, where we can, turn up the volume on one and you turn down the volume on another if we need to. And then, for our single varietals, year on year, the vintage might taste slightly different, but it's more that, say, for example, like the Moscatel, which we will taste next, has of orange blossoms and roses and pears. And so, for example, one year, maybe it'll be a ton of pear, and you won't, the roses will be there, but they'll just be a lot more subtle. And then depending on the weather, the following vintage, it might flip-flop, where it's a lot more roses this year and the pear is still there, but it's subtle. That's kind of what we see for the vintages on the single varietals. But the acholado, we are trying to kind of keep an even keel on that.
Yeah, I think a vintage product should show some differences. I think that's part of the fun. Would you guys make any table wine at all, or is it all go to distillation?
It's all distillation. We'll do like a few bottles here and there, but it's mainly because my grandpa wants to drink it. It's not.
To ask a question, how is it void of color? It's actually aged in stainless steel tanks, so single distillation. It's quite cold in here. It looks pretty clear, but there is this tiny little haze. Are you guys chill filtering it? I imagine so, right? You must do.
No filtering.
No filtering. Go.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not more cloudy, actually. You see.
Well, if you stick it in the fridge, it'll definitely get cloudy. And in the freezer, it'll be very cloudy.
Yeah.
When it comes out of the bottle, it's almost like it's very viscous, not thick. Viscous.
Yeah.
I forget to look at the question.
So it's not aged by the American standard, which would imply oak, but it's been rested for in this case of the Moscatel, 3 years here. And then I guess you find these, this was harvested in 2006, do you find these continue to mellow while they're in glass, or is it sort of, once it's in the glass, sort of done?
Yes, and I like to, I guess mellowing is maybe a more correct term, but I like to call it evolve, because we do notice differences in that the spirit becomes more unctuous as it sits, as it rests longer. And so we're doing it on a bigger scale in the big tanks. But if open this bottle and you drink half of it and then you stick it on your shelf, and half the day your shelf has direct sunlight on it, and then the rest of the day it's cold, the spirit is, going through those temperature fluctuations, and it is still evolving in the glass. So back in the day, we used to rest in glass, not big tanks like the big glass Mama Juanas. And so, yeah, it for sure continues to evolve in your bottle.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I get the rose on this one, I'll tell you what.
Yes, so the Muscatel is this red label, and these the Muscatel is an aromatic varietal, and it is so they haven't found both parents of this grape, but one of them is definitely the Muscat of Alexandria. And
I always thought this was Alexandria. It's not, huh? It's different. It's a hybrid.
It's a hybrid, yeah. They're still doing research on all of these, which I find so interesting, like the actual lineage of them. And in Peru, nobody really asks you like, what's the lineage of this grape? It's just, this is the grape that's always been available. But here, everybody wants to know that kind of stuff. Muscatel is, like you said, roses. I get some orange blossom in there, but right now I'm not getting too much orange blossom.
I got some, you got the pear thing. I feel like a specific kind of pear. It's hard to put your finger on it though. It's like Bosch or something like.
Yeah, sometimes I get like Bartlett pear.
Bartlett, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's definitely it. Tons of that rosy stuff on the palate. Oh, it's lovely. This is a great daytime drink. I'll tell you what, I don't blame you for drinking during a lot of Pisco at lunchtime. This is a fun way to do it. I just had my lunch. It was underwhelming, but the Pisco's really saved it. Is there is there like a reserve you guys do for the family, like something that's been in glass or bottle for like 10, 15, 20 years? Is that a thing that you guys do? Will there ever be like $1,000 bottle of Pisco that you can sell?
You know what? For some reason, this question keeps coming up recently. You're like the third person I talked to about this today.
We like stuff, Romina.
We have some stuff, but it's not massive quantities where we probably would be able to commercialize it. The most probably that we would have would be the 2011 vintage, which still has some good age to it now. You can still find bottles of that in random stores around. Let's see, the last one that somebody sent me a picture of was a random bottle shop in LA. But like corner of not even what you would consider LA proper, like a random small town. I've seen some in New York, and then I heard of one in Miami. But those are, like what's available. But that was our first vintage in the US. So those are just bottles that nobody sold. But in stock, yeah, we have some bottles of that, and I'm starting to consider maybe I should put it out on the market because, like I said, I'm getting a lot of questions about it. And it is, it's technically my personal collection, but it's in the warehouse. And I will periodically grab a bottle, and it's pretty delicious stuff. So it's much more viscous, much more unctuous. And you can tell the age to it.
So people should stock up and like put it in the cellar and let it rock. Wow, that's interesting. There is definitely a connection. I think it's part of the fact that it's an agricultural product to tequila and mezcal in a way. And I think it's important to note that like it's super hard to make something from an agricultural product that you can only harvest once a year taste delicious, like without adding anything else to it. Like if you've tasted Armagnac straight from the still, which is single distilled but on a column still, it's like nuts. Like it's super intense. And I'm sure this is more intense without the resting, but you know, it's a whole different world. And so it's pretty incredible what you guys are able to do with these, particularly the Acholado, that whole blending thing I think is so exciting and interesting. Do you have like a favorite of the varietals that you just keep coming back to? Are you a Moscatel person, Torrontés, Quebranta? What is your, I always love, I don't know why, I just like something about it. It really
I remember that's your favorite one. And that one's a little bit of a higher proof too, so maybe that does it for you. It's kind of like asking which one's your favorite child. I don't really have a favorite per se. I think it just depends on the occasion or what I want to drink.
Of course.
Yeah. So, like for a Pisco sour, I usually go Quebranta. For a Pisco punch, I usually go an aromatic varietal. I love the aromatics for the Pisco punch. Yeah. So I'll go Moscatel or Torrontés. And then the Acholado really can do anything. But I like to experiment with that one a lot as well. So, if I'm trying a new cocktail, I like to do that. I like to pair celery with the Acholado also. And it's fresh and vibrant, but also the Acholado has a slight salinity to it. That's really interesting. We're a coastal desert vineyard. So we get the coastal fog in the morning, so that's the salinity that you pick up on it. Also, a million years ago, where the vineyards are, it used to be the ocean. So there's a lot of salt on the ground there. But yeah, I don't know that I really have a favorite, but I think I drink the Acholado the most.
Well, there's lots and lots of amazing Peruvian restaurants in Los Angeles right now. I mean, let's hope they hang through because, things are a little weird. But they just apparently are going to open restaurants again, which is awesome.
I know. It's very sudden. I was talking to some restaurant people this morning, and everyone's like, caught us off guard. But people are excited, so that's good.
Yeah, I mean, the good restaurants that I've been to were ultra safe and well put together. So I'm hoping that we can remain that way. And that not too long we can enjoy some pisco and some ceviche together.
Yes, that would be fantastic.
I would love that. Can't last forever, so we're gonna hang in there. And I really appreciate your time, Romina. It's been so informative and exciting always to taste these with you. And there's still a bunch of people here. Any questions for Romina before we let her go? If only K&L had food and would reopen. Well, we're technically open, but you just can't come in the shop. And if food, then I wouldn't need to go anywhere else. So I'm kind of glad that I at least have an opportunity to shop somewhere else. Even as a Peruvian, I learned more. That's great news. Yeah, there's so much to learn. It's such an intricate category and complex. Where can you get it? K&L Wine Merchants.
In Hollywood.
Hollywood, Redwood City, all over. We'll ship spirits anywhere in California. And KLWines.com. If it's your first time, check it out. Lots of great stuff. Lots of great pisco. Cool. This has been so fun, Romina. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we got to see each other at least virtually and have a drink together.
We'll come back and do Millet as well.
Oh, yes. I'm glad you have that.
Yeah, I'm so excited. The XO. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's a good one. I went through the lineup the other day and I was very excited. I'm excited to get those out there.
Yeah. Are they ready? Oh, they're out. They're ready, right? I'm going to order some this week.
They're ready, yeah. Mm-hmm. They're ready to go. They hit the warehouse.
Exciting. Awesome. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care. Say hi to your family for me.
Be well.
Bye.